Second prize is 2 copies, right?
Okay, we are taping now, so everybody.
Thank you. It's okay, I'd like to welcome everybody. This is a crowd. I mean, we've got half a dozen people in the audience.
Should we introduce
Great.
ourselves?
Sure, I'm Nils Johnson.
I'm Sue McKenzie, IL.
Jonathan Bogle.
Mike Smith.
Earl Strode. My name is Rich Brown.
And if you haven't signed in, there's a little sign-in
Yep.
sheet there.
Raise
Yeah,
your hand.
it's-
I don't know who your barber is, sir.
I'm a
but I
little
like it.
slow.
A special one.
We have a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
So our agenda tonight, so you can follow the flow, is we want to talk a little bit about what happened at the town meeting. We'd like to talk about steering committee that we're putting together. If you were at the meeting yesterday, I talked about that a little bit. I want to talk about hiring a consultant to assist us in data gathering, data assessment, and the conduct of the visioning session or sessions. And then I want to talk about what we think and what you all think about how we should structure a visioning session. So, first item is a review of the town meeting. I want to give Sue an attaboy or an atta. Go ahead.
Minutes? You do the approval?
Yes, good, yeah. I
I-
wanted to give, I was gonna give her an attaboy for doing a good job yesterday, but
I'm still there.
yeah, she's still there.
Thank you.
That was very good. I thought your preparation was just first rate, and the pictures are worth 1,000 words, and when you see the culverts flooding out, it speaks 1,000 words. What did you all think? It was interesting. The
Well-
votes were close.
Reflecting on it, the town meeting,
Yeah.
reflecting on it, to have that much enthusiasm and interest at the very end of the day,
Yeah.
spoke very well. But, perhaps it was a privilege. And then I've had a number of people who would like to be here, and I hope to get to some of the meetings.
Good.
So, you struck a good chord, as far as I'm concerned.
I think that what was impressive to me was that we had over 500 people voted.
Yeah.
That's shows an awful lot of interest. And I think that what is an old part, I was.
An experienced person.
As an old part, I was very pleased to see the next generation taking over. I mean, most towns, the wonderful process of town meeting is becoming weak because our younger people are so busy chasing kids, going to school, they don't have the time. That's the example of that. You've got the time to do that. I think it was very successful in that respect. I think people are committed and involved in the town. I think the challenge which is ahead of us is to make sure that we open the process of visioning to the entire town so that we continue to have that enthusiasm. It's there now, and we can kill it if we're not careful. And so I would just strongly think this is something which you'll hear me chirping about as we go along.
As we get into that discussion about how we structure things, I want to hear you chirp and hear your thoughts on it. What do you think, John?
I thought it went well as well. Spirited debate over the land use change tax fund and conservation fund. And like Mike said, I do think there are a lot of younger folks running for positions, which is good. 500 votes, 2 years in a row now, I think, shows that people are involved, and I think we just need to tap into that.
Good. How about you?
I was very pleased to see Amendment 2 passed, fairly thoroughly, so,
71%, but who's counting?
that's right.
I was
So they
shocked.
point out.
I didn't.
My
expect
neighbor
it.
said, no sweat, it's gonna pass, so it's like, okay, good, but I still went and voted. I think that, I'm hopeful that's something that we can just put aside, treat it as a fact, and then go on and do the rest of the work we have to do.
Sue, what'd you think?
I was very happy.
Got the money.
I got some
Now,
money.
she was this way at the end of the meeting.
We got the money, we got the important issues out there, and some understanding, and the fact that it was just an understanding that these are things that are critical that have to be done. And I think the town gets it, and recognizes that we're trying to do something about the tax base. We're going at it from several different directions all at once, but that's, our expenses are gonna continue. I keep hoping that there won't be any more storms this summer. Because we have some fragile spots, but
I was really, on my behalf, I was really encouraged. People stayed. I didn't think there would be 50 people left by the time, we got to the committee report, so to speak. And there was a lot. And as I was having my little speech, I was kind of looking out to see if people were gonna go, or, wince, but everybody was paying attention, and that was good. And I'm glad we have some folks here this evening. I thought it was good that issue 2 passed. I was skeptical, I think a lot of people were, that you would get to 2/3. That's a pretty high hurdle in something like that, so that was good. Okay, so the second item is we need to put together a steering committee for the visioning process. I would just like to spend 2 or 3 minutes talking about the one I went through before. This town has gone through several. I know there was one 10 years ago. There was probably one before that, wasn't there? You were involved, Mike.
There have been at least 2 or 3.
Folks,
Some of
please
them are-
sign in if you'd be so kind.
Some of them are okay. I still don't think any of them ever got to the full commitment of people in town. It's very hard.
Yeah.
The best that we ever did was getting, well, there were 10-page pieces that people filled out. And we had a 40% something feedback on that one, which was a higher percentage than what you get when you get 10 or 15 people on it, so.
What, was that 2006?
That was a questionnaire.
So about 10 years
I
ago?
don't, it was actually, I know Frida Swan was quite involved in it, so that may date it back to longer than 10 years ago.
When we did this, I'm from a little town in northeast Ohio, Canfield. People can't say it's cornfield, but as I mentioned at the meeting, we had the same issues. Tax base was just going to hell. And we were a bedroom community. We had been historically hostile to business, so the residents paid for everything. And it just wasn't, it wasn't good. So I'm in the Rotary. I attend the Hanover Rotary here, but back in Ohio, pretty active our Rotary Club was, and the club raised some money to bring in Ball State, which was an urban planning school from Muncie, Indiana. And they brought their graduate students out with a professor, and they helped us go through the data assessment, pull a vision plan together. And we began with a series of what they called charrettes. Comes from a French word where a charrette is a little cart that the architect, 200 years ago would have his rolled up paper so that he could draw on. And we had a big hall, and we kind of brainstormed the first portion of it, where we asked people, what do you like about town that is good? And then we would write the things down on sheets, put them on the side of the walls, and kind of get a consensus, and then what do you like, what don't you like about town? And then some, where do you want to see us get in 10 years? We had 3 of those, as I recall, so because people can't come, you have to show some flexibility. I'm assuming we've got to do at least 2 here. We could do more if that's the consensus. But it was very good, because people had a lot of, I don't want to say misinformation, they just weren't informed about things. We had an initial meeting of our steering committee. I've told the story to our group before, but I will repeat it. And we sat down and we said, I was the chairman, I said, let's talk about the sewers. And the lady in the back says, I don't want to talk about sewers, we need a community center. And I said, okay, where's the money gonna come from? She said, what do you mean? I said, well, the tax base is inadequate, we need to attract some other businesses. She said, yeah. I said, well, businesses go where there are sewers and water. And so people don't understand the constraints for building a tax base, if that's the consensus that where people want to go. We have the same issues here. We have lack of water, probably the hydrology. Part of my earlier life was, I'm a lawyer, but we have worked with the landowners and developers and zoning issues and that type of thing. And I fought a landfill once, early in my career, and I had to learn groundwater hydrology. And one of the things you learn is where you got a lot of mountains, you probably have areas that's bringing water down and into the low spaces. So water is probably something we have around here. Soils and passing perk tests for septic tank systems, that's another issue that can be very variable. It's one of the constraints that we really have to think about. But anyway, we went through, did our plan. We worked with Ball State. They had recommendations. One of the things was we had a sort of a downtown area like we have here. It was an old part of the Connecticut Western Reserve with it green and the same, kind of looks similar actually. And they said you need to develop that and try to get the new library that we were going to get as an anchor tenant that might attract some redevelopment in the downtown area and so forth. Took us 7 years, but we got it done. Did the land acquisition, got the library built, and now there is indeed some activity on the sewer extensions, and our tax base back there is much improved and really in a way that was consistent with our values as a town, and as it didn't upset anybody. When it was all said and done, it worked. So I would assume that we're going to go through a visioning process like that. One of the things we want to discuss tonight is hiring a consultant. We've met with a couple and had recommendations from the state and the regional committees to help to have the consultant help us with the visioning process. They're very good about massaging data, collecting data, giving analogs, other projects that they've worked on, and so forth. How many of you in the audience, let me ask, would be willing to serve on a steering committee to work on a visioning effort? Aaron, I talked with you.
The visioning, it's about like creating a plan for what the future.
No, not initially. Visioning is finding out what people like about Lyme.
Okay.
What people don't like about Lyme. A
Right.
number of folks could comment on the taxes are rough.
Okay.
What kind of character do we want to maintain as we move through time about Lyme? We want to find out what people want and what they don't want. We don't want to go into it with any conclusions because we haven't found that out yet. And I can say what how much land is subject to taxation, how much land is exempt. Those are facts.
Right.
But
It's
you don't want to.
like research.
We want to research, and Mike says we did a survey before. I'm not sure that's something we want to do again, but.
What do you mean a survey report?
You said there was a questionnaire.
The questionnaire, yes.
Survey, we can discuss
I
whether
mean, it
that's,
depends on how you,
ask the questions.
well, I think the key is, there are lots of ways of doing it, but we wanna make sure we get as many people participating in the process.
Right.
And how you do that is where you hire outside people for ideas on that.
So I'd like, so possible committee members would be Aaron, you talked to me before.
Dan Brand?
Dan, last name, I'm sorry.
Brand.
B-R-A-N-D-T,
D. Routine.
Brand, sir,
Matt Stevens.
Matt Stevens. S-T-E-P-H,
V, thank you.
ma'am.
Meg Sheehan. Meg Sheehan.
Meg, you're on the conservation
Right.
committee, yeah.
I'm not quite sure what it does and how much time it takes, but I'm interested.
Takes what you give it.
Chair. Steering committee to direct, it's a steering committee to direct, it's a steering committee to direct and provide input to the visioning process.
Yes, exactly.
All right, I'll put my name on it for Jonathan Maslin.
And M,
M-A-S-L-A-N-D, up on the PowerPoint.
okay. I always wanted to fish in the pond, I've never got
Come on by.
myself out there. Got a
Right.
kayak, I fish in the river all the time.
I don't know that.
And then, sir,
Duncan McIntosh. M-A-C-K.
Nils,
Okay.
potentially, Ray Clark. I'd like to know how the visioning process, as you see it, differs from the development of the master plan. And some years ago, I was involved in a land conservation group, LAVA, and we were, I guess, seeking alternatives to rampant development where we would buy and conserve land and place the houses strategically and try to minimize development. And that seemed like an appropriate way to acknowledge development and conservation ethics as well. There was also, courtesy of Lyme Timber a few years back, for lack of a better word, a visioning process which they undertook. There was talk of an alternative southern village. And I think all of these have merit. I think we all share your concerns. We're glad to see that they're being addressed. But if we're gonna do something, and I would like to do something, I'd like to see that it's respectful of the master plan. And as Mike said, that we try to incorporate as much of the community as possible. So I'm not in favor of, let's just say, rampant rezoning of town, but I do think that prudent, cautious, well thought through rezoning is something I could support, and that's one reason I'm here tonight. I'd like to see what your thinking is.
let me just respond to a little bit of that. Again, it's important that we don't go into this with an agenda, except to develop attitudes and data and understand what the forces are out there that are facts, meaning restrictions because the land won't percolate and you can't develop it. Or we met with 3 different developers to try to get a sense of what the market might be. I don't think anybody's gonna come into Lyme and wanna do retail, maybe a barber shop or something like that, but you know, that doesn't seem to be realistic. So there are.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
I don't know why you're saying that. I
Well,
really
just
don't know why you're saying
go ahead.
that. We have a real problem in this town with communication. We have a lousy internet. If we had good communication, it's conceivable that existing buildings would gain new tenants that would give this town a boost in professional activity. one of the things that bothers me about this town, and one of the things that I witnessed yesterday, is that you have various segments of this town, such as the town council and the various other entities that don't seem to talk to one another. At least this is how I see it. When I moved to this town, the most important thing to me in this town was the fact that there were a tremendous amount of people that really cared about the open spaces, the particular, everything. As I've been here for 9 years, and I've witnessed this astounding growth in this town over 9 years. And the people that have built, such as this building here, was not here when I moved here. It happened with the help of this man over here. And so I've seen a huge change in this town, and a good change. Everything has been really good, well thought out. I'm proud to be part of this town. But the problem that I have, as many of us have, is I can't afford to live here. And I don't know if that's specifically based on the fact that we don't have business as much as we don't talk to one another. I look at various statistics. I started my first company over 50 years ago, and I had as many as 50 employees at one of my companies. And I look at a school system, for example. I look at everything I look at in this town is based on my business experience. And I look at a school, for example, that's got a ratio of 9 to 1. And then I look at our neighbors who have a ratio of 12 to 1, 13 to 1. And I know from experience that the children that have this higher ratio are particularly successful. I don't believe that the school, for example, is speaking with the select board enough. I don't think that the select board is saying to the school system, now wait a minute, you know, here is a situation where there's approximately $400,000 in a ratio that could be well used as a benefit to the taxpayers. So what
That's actually very frequently a conversation.
Well,
Having been on the budget committee for 2 terms, I can tell you that, and I don't know what it's like over the past year, but just having gone off, seeing the dialogue that exists between the select board and the school and the budget committee and the way that folks are willing to share information, they're very much thinking about this. And
Well,
you know, it'd be a great thing to the point of a visioning initiative to dig deeper and to understand. The school went through a strategic planning process and is just going through one right now, starting with a questionnaire. So to jump to, frankly, uninformed conclusions.
I have no conclusions. I'm just saying.
Uninformed assumptions.
I'm speaking.
Let me exercise my.
Specifically from my.
Let me exercise my authority
experience.
as the chairman of the meeting here, just to keep things moving. I thought the moderator did such a good job yesterday at the town meeting. I do think that very conversation is one that needs to be had. I just don't know that we can get to that. My wife shares many of your thoughts, by the way. I don't know that we can get to it this evening. There's some things that we need to accomplish.
Just maybe to finish up with people who are interested in being engaged, right?
Yes.
That'd be good just from a process
I think that's great. I enjoyed your remarks, appreciated your remarks at the meeting yesterday, sir. But for right now, let's try to get a committee structured somehow, or begin to get one structured. I don't know, we have to firm it up tonight. This group is going to meet now. We've been meeting once a month. We're going to increase that every two weeks, so there's going to be lots of opportunity to participate. Yes, ma'am.
I'll put my name in on the
Barbara?
list, Barbara Woodard.
I do think that you know, there's a, you made a number of points. One of the constraints here is that a very small amount of land, like 5%, virtually pays all the taxes. Once you put stuff in conservation, Rusty Keith had an interesting presentation yesterday. Once you put something in conservation, you're paying tax at essentially an agricultural rate, which runs from either $20 or $25 an acre up, if you had sandy loam soil for potatoes or something, it might be $400 an acre. So there are great swaths of land, 95% of it, in town that virtually pay no taxes. So it's all on the rest of us, and we're all under the same.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that right? Like, my neighbor owns 13 acres, and he pays not a single dollar?
No.
Because it's
We have
in,
to-
No, it's at the current
I
use.
looked at the tax, and it was either 0 or maybe
Very low.
like nothing. So he owns 13 acres, he can walk through it, chop it down, do whatever he wants, but pays no taxes. Is that okay? That's the law?
So I
It's a
happen
state
to,
law. Can I just
It's
comment
a
on
state,
that?
yeah, I'm just curious,
Before we jump into a discussion of like current use and how bad it is, there were a lot of questions that I have about Rusty's presentation, and I'm meeting with him. I think it would be really good if we could get some better factual information and more accurate information about that.
I agree.
And if I could just use this opportunity to make a bigger picture question about
Sure.
the visioning process, and I think you raised a good point about everybody can vision that they want this and that in the town, but if it's not possible because of these constraints that are structural and can't be changed, is that what we're gonna be spending our time on, is getting what everybody wants? Or is it better to update the master plan and go with what's already been done and work from there instead of going off on this big survey about what ideally we'd like to have? And since, then just to wrap up with that.
I'm gonna have Sue respond to that.
All right, and so then, but then when I look at your mission too, it's about addressing the economic issues of the town, and can there be a broader look at not just building out land, but are other things that the town could do to address the inequitable tax burden on some lower income residents? It's a social justice and an economic justice issue. Are there more creative uses, things like a meals tax, or, trying to figure out?
The only mechanism we have is the property tax. There's no income tax.
I know, but
There's
there
no
are
sales
other
tax.
things that can be done.
We spent a year with the tax study committee looking at these issues. And the only thing that we were able to do legally was to add $5 to the auto registration, which would bring us an extra $10,000.
Could we create a, just on River Road, could we
A
create
toll
like a
booth?
toll?
Well,
No, this is not a joke. I had 3 beers and came up with that idea.
yeah,
Like,
No.
can we,
it was,
it was only 3.
somebody suggested, somebody did suggest.
Well, it was actually 2.
Just
but-
River Road
Okay.
South, actually.
Yeah, right. Somebody did actually
And
suggest
just for
that,
Vermont
and the state
people.
said no.
Just for Vermont people,
I like that
yeah,
idea.
right, actually.
right?
Yeah, go, let me address the issue of the master plan. It is outdated. It is our opinion that it is outdated and needs to be updated. We have tried to address this with the planning board. By law, that is the planning board's responsibility. You need to attend some planning board meetings. So, visioning is also a planning board function. But again, it's
Not
not
exclusively.
being done, and this is not by law. Others can do a visioning process, so we're doing it.
It's my understanding that zoning changes are affected only to the extent that they are implementing the guidance of the master plan. So I think that's a state statute, it's a requirement. So I think this is a great process that you're doing, but if the ultimate goal is to change our zoning ordinances, I think
don't
you're
know that that's
you're gonna
the-
have to go back to the master plan.
Right, right, and we've
What-
invited them all here tonight.
Great.
We did. We said, would you participate? And
I know one of them told me they could not make it, so.
May I say one thing, that this idea, when you have land that is under conservation, that you're not, such as I have, for example, my entire property is under conservation. I pay a lot of taxes. I mean, I pay over $18,000 to put a key in my door. And then I look at other people in this town with, their houses are a little bit nicer, but similar situations, and they're paying far more than that. So the idea that out there that people don't pay much is a misnomer.
Right,
It's a
that's
total
really a
misnomer.
separate issue.
No, it
We're-
really isn't a
but to
separate
Meg's
issue.
point-
It is not a separate issue, because there are people in this town that think that many of us with conserved land are getting a free ride. We are not.
No one is saying
We are paying a hell of a
that.
lot of money.
Right.
So the issues
It would,
are
it would be,
deeper.
let me say, it would be interesting, I've gone over Rusty's numbers, he's spent a lot of time, Rusty Keith, our selectman, he's spent a lot of time on that, and he's a pretty smart guy, I think. And he's about got me half convinced that there's nearly a 20% bump to our taxes that we are paying now that we wouldn't pay if we didn't have that system. I'm not here to debate.
You know, I think a fair place to start is recognizing that one of the reasons why everybody is here is because folks feel like at one point, they're paying too much in taxes. So from a visioning perspective, I think if this is the way that you want to expand things to others in the community, this is gonna fizzle out really quickly. Because I don't think that what's being expressed is an open perspective. The spirit of visioning is to listen to what the ideas are, not to jump to conclusions that Rusty's got the right answers, for example.
I'm not saying.
Or that he's halfway there and having the right
I'm not saying that.
right solution to the
that
problem.
I'm just saying, I looked at the numbers, and he did a lot of work, and you should look at them. And
Right,
you
he
can
shared them
come-
with you,
could come to
he
your own-
cooked those numbers.
You could come to your own,
So Nils, I'd like to bring the conversation back to certainly my understanding of the visioning process. I've talked to the folks at the planning board, I've sat over there at planning board meetings many, many times. And they say the town, they've told me many times, the town does not support things that I care about. I should, full disclosure, my name's Rich Brown, I live next to the Lockline Lodge, I'm part owner there. We've been trying to get the co-housing project through. To that point, the planning board has been relying on the community attitude survey that came out in 2006 to say the town does not want this. Anyone in professional planning circles will tell you that data that's more than 2 years old is suspect. It's just old, it's just not likely to be current. The planning board, as Sue points out, the planning board would have full opportunity to go do a visioning process, see what changes to the master plan might be necessary, and then from there, see what changes to the ordinance might occur. The planning board has chosen not to do that. I won't describe reasons, but they're not doing it. And so this group has said, let's do this. Let's find out what people think. Let's talk to people in town. It's brutally difficult to do this, but somebody's gotta do it. We'll write up the sense of the town as to what happens. And then that begins the discussion about what else do we wanna do? Knowing the consensus of the town, or knowing the hot buttons of the town, knowing the preferences of the town. What do we wanna do next?
May I just say that I've always been a proponent of what Lockline is trying to do. And I've always felt that the reason the townspeople have voted no is because of the student issue. And, you know, my wife and I spoke about this last night. and we spoke about, you know, where the hell are we gonna go? We love it here. We'd love to be able to move into a small apartment and continue walking and do what we do until we're both 100. But, you know, we need to start somewhere, and I've always felt that the Lock Lyme offered the best opportunity. And there seems to be a large hang-up with children in school.
Well, I think that's part of the visioning process. I think we need to call out, what do we wanna do about the school? What do we wanna do about, people moving into town? Do we wanna encourage people to move into town? Do we wanna discourage people from moving into town? I think that's an interesting conversation. I think that certainly ought to come out in a visioning meeting. And, you know, as Bill says, we wanna have many of these, so everybody gets a chance to say their say.
I would like, at this point, yes, sir.
Well, maybe I'm gonna say what you were gonna say, but I think that if we're gonna make progress here tonight, we should complete your loop around to get those people who should be involved. But then I think we need to focus on two things. One, which was brought up earlier, is the, one of the critical things that it would be nice if we could get started on is how we get the internet up and going. That, I think there's almost 100% consensus, that's something that we have to work out a process to do. And the second thing is, which I hope is where you're heading, is how do we get as many people involved in the visioning process?
How many people, I want to entertain a motion here in a second. How many people is it appropriate to have on a steering committee? What do you all think? I also had Martha Tecca sent me, you all know Martha, that she would like to become involved, and then
Judy Russell?
Judy Russell.
I don't have to be on this, but I'll be here and I'll add whatever I can add. I'm an extremely outspoken person.
And I like Martha, but she doesn't live in Lyme. I like Martha and respect her very much, but she doesn't live in Lyme.
I think you should live in Lyme. I don't want
I don't think it's
non-Lyme
appropriate.
people. And I don't mind outspoken people.
We're not getting people from Concord and Maine and wherever.
I would think more than
She's a friend
five
of mine.
would make it more cumbersome, so I would not keep the number any more than 5 to start with.
Is there consensus that you need to be a resident with Mike?
Right?
Yes.
Should be a resident.
Okay, so Martha, I'll see her in church and just say thank you, but
For
attend the
giving
meetings, but yeah.
For giving the hired consultant.
So we've got 10 people who have expressed an interest, and I need to have some people from my board here too. We did.
One thing that I would say is that I'm not so hung up on the number, although I appreciate the point that we don't want it to be an overwhelming number because that does not create the kind of administrative efficiency that we need. But I do think that we need representative stakeholder groups appropriately represented on this.
Anybody in those guys? That's a big group in town.
Everybody's in those guys.
Well, anybody here tonight?
I've worked with them
You're in those
before,
guys?
I'm the tax collector and a 45-year resident. And I've seen a lot of changes, so.
I've only been here 35 years.
I'm not as eloquent as many people are, but I have
May I
perspective.
ask, Barbara, one of the things that we keep getting asked by some people is that, is this really a problem? Are taxes really a problem? How many people have problems with their taxes? Do you have, yeah, right, do you have a sense of people who come in who are struggling? Can you get that information for us? You know, I know you're not gonna have a hard and fast, we're never gonna know everybody who's struggling to pay their taxes, but you have a sense of people who are having a hardship. That would be good.
I would like to
information.
say something. I would like to help you people out, but that does not stop us from selling our home and moving, because that's the situation we're in. The taxes have gone up in this town so precipitously that it has taken the air out of our savings. It's craziness. This is the craziest tax situation I've ever seen in my life. I looked at the yearly increase, and it's doubled since I moved here. It's stupid.
Ours has gone up tenfold.
Well,
And-
that's lunacy.
We have 90 acres almost entirely conserved, and our tax bill is 36,000. And
It's-
I think, yeah, I think that's too much.
I do too.
Well, I mean, it's based on the assessed value of your home,
There you
right,
go.
and the rate, so what are you
Yeah.
gonna do about it? How can
I
you
don't
do
know,
that?
But-
that's
but
why,
the
I'm here.
budget
That's one
should-
reason I'm
So-
here. But anyway, it's
Yeah,
not
but-
about
so-
that.
I'll take a motion. How many, somebody on my committee
Thank
moved
you.
to,
I got I'll take it.
how many people that we create a committee and that it has X members? I'll entertain a motion.
I would move that we create a committee, that it be plus or minus 10,
Mine?
because that's the only way you're going to get a cross-section of the community. 5 is just, it would be too limited.
It's gonna be a lot of work.
So let's call it 9.
You can
In
go
case there's a
9 or
vote.
11 or however, but I think you need, unfortunately, this is a very diverse town. And a small group, you would be completely isolated because you are not allowing people to participate.
No, but we want the opposite. We want the most amount. Well, okay, so we have a motion to create a steering committee. I assume you're saying to conduct a visioning process and to have, what do y'all think, 9 or 11?
11, I mean,
Okay, so.
The meetings are open anyway,
Right,
I
that's
assume,
right.
so anybody
I mean,
could go.
The
people
point
can
of
always
being-
attend every meeting.
One of the points
Yeah.
about being on the steering committee is you have homework.
Yeah.
We're
That you
gonna
gotta
be-
do if you're
We're
there.
gonna be meeting every other week. You have responsibilities, so if you wanna come, that's great. If you wanna be on the steering committee, you have to be ready to work. I mean, and it's only gonna go on for a few months. Because I hope we can tie up this, you're grinning broadly. I hope,
I've heard so many times it's only gonna be on in a few months, and I'm still in the fire department.
So-
5 years later.
Can I-
Yeah.
can I just,
Yeah.
about that time frame. So what do you, so it involves, so the committee, you guys gonna hire this consultant, and the steering committee is going to guide the visioning process that you think will only take a few months, and then their job will be done?
We're going to discuss that, and that's, after we're done with this issue, we're going to discuss that more fully. So let's, Mike, was your motion that we create the steering committee, that we conduct a visioning plan, and that we have 11 people as, and was that your second too?
And I'm not putting a 2-month limit on it, because I don't think that's.
We don't have to at
Few.
this
Because I think that, I
Listen to
think
us,
what we need to do is, there's a lot of work which has to go in to get the cross-section of people involved. If we don't follow that, you're dead.
I agree. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next item, we have had several meetings. I've had a number of additional telephone conversations with Stuart Arnett of Arnett Consulting in Concord. He, his name came to us through either Ann Duncan Cooley or Steve from Upper Valley, Sunapee Regional Planning, I can't remember.
Steve Schneider.
He did the
Steve
Lebanon
Schneider.
plan, I believe.
He just finished the Lebanon plan. And conveniently, he included Lyme as one of the communities to which they were comparing the Lebanon experience. So I think by hiring him, we kind of get that work that's for free, that's, he's already done.
So it's already been decided who's gonna lead the process?
Well, that's
I think
that's what needs to be discussed.
that raises a lot of concern for me.
Well,
I mean, if this is already baked, you know.
What do you mean?
Well, they've done a lot
Why?
of background work, so.
we've really done a lot
I
of
know,
work.
I've read the documents, but if you're gonna put together a steering committee that expands beyond this group, why not do an RFP? I mean, I'm sure Stewart's competitors would be jumping at this opportunity as well. Let's see who's got the best proposal.
I'm not against that. What I am against is, we went to a planning board meeting and one of the people said, well, this is gonna be a 3 or 4 year process. No, it's not. We're gonna get something done. And to facilitate them, we've already gone out and raised the money for this so that nobody in this audience or this table has to finance this, and certainly not the town. So we're prepared to move forward and.
Well, there might be somebody who's willing to do it pro bono as well, right? I mean, why not get RFPs?
How long is it going to take to do that?
I do an RFP and give them something like 6 weeks.
6 weeks?
experience.
That's a long time.
Sure.
You mean to respond to the RFP? You only need 2 or 3 weeks.
Sorry, to do and to make a decision on the RFP, that probably means bringing in some finalists who are gonna pitch.
Right.
Sure.
It sounds like a great.
I'd like to
A
have
range
Nils,
of people, not just people who have worked in promoting development, but people who have a broad range of experience with, sorry,
Earl Stroud?
I'd like to have Nils review the effort that has gone into finding a consultant to keep us moving, that's reasonable, and can get the job done, so.
Well, again, to recap, appreciate you all being here. We've worked really hard at this for 9 months. Okay. We met with Ann Duncan Cooley, who's the Grafton lady. We had meetings with UNH Extension Service, a guy named Jeffrey Sawicki. We had meetings with Julia Griffin, the Hanover City Manager, the lady who's the head of the Chamber of Commerce in Hanover. We met with her at Dowd's one night, met with Steve Schneider from Upper Valley down at his office. And there were other, yes.
Have you met with anyone who is familiar with places for older people?
I talked with one of the developers from, I think it's St. Johnsbury, who I know, who
Yeah.
develops such things. And I know a little bit about it because we just got one in our community back in Ohio. And
You got one what?
we got a retirement.
Continuing care community?
Yes.
Yeah.
CCRC?
I don't know the acronym, but they're good in the sense that we took back there a property that generated $17,000 in taxes and built it in $250,000 in taxes. Most, a lot of what.
Well,
which
there's a
was-
tremendous waiting list. I mean, tremendous.
One of the things I have in mind to do is to talk to the folks at Kendall. I don't know whether they want to do Kendall North or anything like that, but you have to have a certain critical mass. I don't want to get sidetracked here, but you have to really have 100 beds before it
Well-
works economically.
Well,
Let's,
Why don't we, I was chair of Kendall for 4 years, so I can bring you up to date at some
Okay.
point in the future.
I'm
So I'd
wondering
just
why
like to
your
say that
committee.
We have a lot to offer here for people, retired people. We have a clinic, we have restaurants, we have a lot to offer.
I don't disagree with you, just when do we discuss that? I think, let's move on.
I'm just wondering why your committee is actually appointing a steering committee that may be at odds with the work that you've done. Why are you not doing this sort of in-house with the people around the table, and the group here can continue to come in and have, now that we know, I'm new to this, so I'm expressing an interest in what you're doing, and we'll continue to try to participate and be a part of it. You could approach the problem in that way.
You could, I look to the Earls and the Mikes of the group who have experience through many decades with the community. And so everybody has expressed that we need to broaden the group as much as possible, and I think that is probably true. The more the merrier, as far as I'm concerned, recognizing that you have to move the thing along, and you can't get sidetracked too much with, you've got to remember what your focus is going to be. So, so we have a motion and a second to do the committee, Did we vote on that? I guess we did.
Yes.
We did, okay. I got a little what you got earlier, Sue.
It's catching.
So, Stuart, Arnett. Yes, sir. Ma'am.
Do you have a written scope of work, for this consultant?
We had to get through the town meeting to kind of take the temperature of the town, and wanted to have this meeting before we did it. So what I would like to do is to have a general authorization, a vote to engage him and get a proposal. And if that doesn't
You should be
seem,
writing a scope of work for the consultant that you want to hire, but, I mean, that's how I've always done it. You write, this is what I want you to do. And they come back and say, this is how we'll go about doing this.
he has already submitted some things like that. But again, we wanted to have a vote, make sure there was buy-in. That was very clear to me yesterday at the meeting, that enough people wanted more information, wanted to go through this. Your participation tonight has confirmed that. I would like to have a motion to engage him, not necessarily hire him, but maybe bring to a meeting in 2 weeks what you're talking about, a scope, a proposal. I guess we could do a request for proposal broadly, and I just think that throws us back 2 months as a practical matter, and I don't want to do that.
What is the budget for the study, for the consultant?
He said that it would be, it depends on whether we got, like UNH at one point was talking about working with us. I found them to be pretty bureaucratic. There was a $2,500 grant that they could give you. You had to, there was another, there's Plan New Hampshire, we talked with them. There's timing for when you make your submissions, then you have to follow up with a bunch of reports, and for the relatively small dollars involved, we felt as a group it would be better to just raise the money and not have to report into whatever bureaucracy was giving you $2,500. And having been through this before, that seemed
So,
like
I
the
mean,
plan.
roughly, what is the budget? I mean, what?
We raised 15,000.
Okay.
That's in the can, so to speak.
Nils,
From whom? Who, just somebody said, hey, here's.
Chris
the-"
Ramsden on our, no, it's a number of
So-
people. Chris Ramsden,
Okay.
who couldn't be here tonight, he was at the meeting yesterday, but he had a commitment out of town, has done that.
Okay. In no relation to the people that will receive the money? Or they're not bodies?
There's no conflict. Oh, with it, no. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I, just curious, yeah.
it
The
seemed,
money was raised anonymously.
Okay,
None of us know where the money came from,
okay, I'm just curious.
so
Just wanna
there's
make
not
sure
gonna
there's
be
no
any
conflict
influence.
and.
No.
going-
Chris is my neighbor, I vouch for him.
Okay.
He's a great guy, and his parents are great people too.
All right, yeah, no, I just,
I'm
you know,
not-
I'm like.
I'm a little bit confused about
Everybody's so fearful.
Well,
the steering committee had, as a organization here, have we made any guidelines of what a steering committee should do? For example, getting a consultant to start getting us some data may not really, in our eyes, have anything to do, that's a poor expression, with the steering committee. So I don't know if people on the steering committee need more of a guideline of what's expectations.
Undoubtedly you do, but I couldn't write one out this afternoon. We need to kind of take this initial step, get some specifics from Stuart, if that's the way we decide we want to go. And in 2 weeks, we'll have something that is more focused. But right now,
Yeah, because it seems as though we're going like an amoeba here in 55 different directions, and I think we need a little bit more structure.
let me talk about what the Ball State group did for our little town. They came back in and they looked at population densities, income brackets, how many people had,
Who's doing this?
When we did this in Ohio,
With
I'm trying to explain to you.
I understand, but where is this information coming from, a consultant or a steering committee?
It could come from both, exactly, because when you go on the state website, there's a lot of data there. It's a question of organizing it and presenting it in some type of way that is digestible by people reviewing it. So, why don't,
If I might,
Yeah.
I think the charge of the steering committee is to lay out the kinds of things that we want to learn. I think there's, some of it is how do we have the right forums, the right meetings, the right meeting times and all, to get enough people together. I think clearly the steering committee also comes up with the goals of the, I hope people don't take this the wrong way, the goals of the process. We want an understanding of what people in town think. We want an understanding of the very real problems so that we can say there is or isn't, or there are a dozen such many acres of conserved land, and that's believed to be a fact, and that we don't have to argue about each of those facts. So we want to know, what does the town think? What do people in town think? What are real facts? How much tax revenue do we get? How much do these things cost, those things, whatever? In order to then inform the meetings that we have with people, people say, I want all these things. Well, those would cost real money. We have to make, what trade-offs can we make? So let me come back. I think the steering committee lays out those goals. What do we want the outcome? What do we want the process to lead to? And that's information that we can use for making decisions going forward.
remember, we were appointed by the select board, this particular committee, to aid them thinking about our tax base and what might be done. And so that's what we're trying to do. Now, the steering committee's job, let me put the RNet thing on hold for a second and deal with the other issue.
You presented all of that to the planning board.
I think that's the general confusion here, is that if this is a group that's tasked with kind of a specific, this is to look at tax issues. That's what the role of this group is, like, how do we figure that out? Whereas a lot of the conversation, I think, is about more of a broader master plan discussion. So it's almost two separate discussions that are occurring at the same time. I think what to Phil, yeah, I think to Phil and a lot of your points, that's what we hope the planning board would step up and say, let's start doing it, like revisiting the master plan and start that. Whereas this group is really tasked with, we have a tax issue, what are the solutions to the tax issue? And I think that may be the disconnect, just in listening to what you're saying versus what, and I think you can get to the same place. I think that's the concern with the engineer potentially with a specific skill set. So if you're looking at like a broad scale, you find out what are all the problems, and then you find the engineers that are strong at those problems. This may be an engineer that's very strong at tax problems and looking at commercial development or whatever it is to create the solution. So I think it's just a little, it just feels like a little disconnect, I think, on the true master plan.
Again, our job is not to, at this point, to debate all these issues. Our
Right.
job is to put a structure together so we can have that debate in the broad community, okay?
But no, that's not what this summary says of your charge. It says there's a need to identify suitable businesses for Lyme.
Say it again?
A need to identify suitable, in your mission statement thing here, your charge from the select board. Clear need to increase the tax base and relieve property owners of taxes. Businesses don't wanna locate here. There's a need to identify suitable businesses for Lyme and identify and remove the restrictions that prevent development of a broader tax base. So I'm confused about what you're saying. How does the visioning and going out and asking people gonna give that specific answer?
Okay, let's take two possible results. Let's say that we have our visioning process and people participate. and they hear the facts about how much land is taxed, what the rates are, what the increase has been, and it appears to, what's the trajectory of taxes and what they're likely to be. They come to understand what current use does and how much of that affects our holdings in Lyme, and they come to understand what the real facts are, what the limitations are, because you can't do things on unpaved roads. So where, if there were to be development, where does it have to go, okay? People need to understand. So visioning is not only taking the temperature of the community, it's also putting some of the facts and constraints so that people, when they make a choice, can say, oh, you know, we were at one planning meeting and the person said, why don't you just buy it? Or why don't you just do? Well, that's a magic wand. That's magical thinking. That's not well considered. You hold off, sir. So what we're trying, so that's one route. So you go through it and people understanding what the constraints are, understanding if there is to be growth, where it has to take place, and people say, okay, we can have some reasonable development of this kind that we will also identify as part of the visioning process. What might people be willing to put up with in order to have some tax relief? The other result would be you go through that, you develop the same information, and 51% of the people in town say, we have, you know, I'm a lawyer, my wife's a doctor, we got plenty of money, we don't care about the taxes. We want to keep Lyme going as it is, essentially a museum, okay?
That changed at the vote.
That doesn't.
That changed at our vote yesterday.
It may have, and I don't want to come to a conclusion.
There's
I'm
people
just-
who have different perspectives beyond that too.
That-
Right? I might be closer to where you are on that, but if you want to engage the community, you can't start with judgments
I
like that.
agree, and I've said that 4 times already. I don't want to.
Well, that's why I think you're not gonna have, from an outside-in perspective here, you're not gonna have credibility unless you make this a more transparent process, right? And for example,
enough.
selecting Stewart's firm and making a decision that that's the one that we're gonna go with right now, I think would be, my caution would be that you are not gonna have legitimacy and credibility with the town.
Well, certainly not with you, and
No,
I respect that, and I think that is, what does our committee feel on that issue? Do you want to have an RFP? And if you do, might the timing be? You certainly would if this was town money, but it's not.
You're talking about making decisions for the community.
Go ahead.
I think by jumping ahead, which I know the homework that you've done, you are going to lose the credibility of the town, because the process of choosing the consultant is really one of the critical pieces in determining the work that's going to be done. And I'm expressing my opinion. I've had a little bit of experience with Stuart on, he's probably fine, but I think that you need to be able to get the confidence of the community behind you. If you get too far out ahead, you're dead.
I agree. Earl?
I'll pass for the moment.
John?
It seems to me that if we are delegating some responsibility to a visioning committee, that they should have input in the selection of whatever professional it is that we want to retain. And so that would be my thought.
Sorry,
I'm gonna say, agree with Jonathan. But for
Okay, I
that
think
to-
that's 4, so let's just proceed on that basis, that we do an RFP, but that we do it in a way that's expeditious. Let me see, we got 2 weeks before the next meeting, let's put something together, bring it to the next meeting, maybe you can help. It sounds like you've had some experience with those type of things, maybe we could talk after the
Sure.
meeting and
Happy to.
figure out how we can do that. Is it agreed that we need to do this with some speed and not, I mean, you don't wanna get too far out over your skis, obviously. But having been around this type of thing, do we wanna be here in 2 years from now, or do you wanna?
I think there's an
get this
express
done?
sense of urgency. I think
Okay.
that was heard yesterday as well. So, I think, yeah, you wanna move forward, but to Mike's point, I think you wanna do it with, you're not gonna be successful without that credibility. And I think you're in a situation, from an outside-in perspective again, you're in a situation that's a typical steering committee problem. You're ahead of everybody else here. You need to do more to educate folks. Let me give you one other example. Today's meeting wasn't publicly announced. I mean, it might have been posted on a board, but it wasn't put on the listserv until this morning.
Well, remember, the listserv is not an official, it's the town website that is.
Okay,
But
it's
also
where
it's the best
people
way of
go
reaching
for
people.
information, right? You gotta meet people where they are. Let's not get into the rules of the road here in terms of where things get posted.
Fair enough, fair enough.
Are your minutes posted on the town website?
They are.
Great, okay. But I'll do some
This-
more
this-
homework.
This meeting will be as well,
Good.
which I guess is, we're gonna,
And just for full disclosure, I am videotaping the meeting.
Nice.
I'll push it up to YouTube as soon as I can, and then I can make it known, so if anybody wants to watch it again, you'd be more than welcome to.
No, I think that's great.
I learned yesterday when you stood up
Yeah,
at the meeting.
me too.
okay, so let's, I wanna,
I wanted to
go ahead.
question. We have a number of well-meaning people out here in the so-called steering committee, but is there any, I hate organizations, but is there a head honcho or 2 or 3 that can speak for the group? Because otherwise, it's gonna be, I don't know how you're gonna handle that group.
I think somebody from this committee that reports to the selectman needs to be the
Need a
chairperson, whether
chair.
it's me or whether it's any of the other folks here. Because we have a little corporate memory about the other research and work that we've done at this point in time.
Who's it gonna be?
Well, I mean, I'll take a nomination. Does anybody want to volunteer to be chairman of the steering committee, John?
Do I wanna volunteer?
You got your kindergarten.
I was waiting for that, really. I don't know that I would volunteer to be chair, only because of the obligations that I have coming up. But I would encourage, Rich, I would encourage you to do it, since you seem to be the master on housing. That's an issue that is at least going to be in the planning board sites this year. And I don't know of anyone in town who understands our housing situation better than you do. So that seems to be a group that needs to be well represented on this committee.
Let me say this, I love Rich Brown, but we've had 2 votes on that, and he's got an axe to grind. And that, though I think his participation on the committee would be great, do you want to be the lightning rod, and does that hurt our overall?
Mike Smith knows the community very well.
I can't do it. Sorry.
Never mind.
Good try.
I was just gonna pay him a compliment. Never mind.
I think giving it to Rich is a good idea, and it would introduce him to the rest of the community in a different light.
No,
What do you all think?
I don't
I'm just throwing it
I
out.
suspect Rich's views would not be the ones that hold sway on whatever steering committee comes out of this thing. I think that he'd be tempered by everybody else. I don't think that'd be a conflict myself, unless he doesn't want to do it.
I'm sweating bullets over here. I think I'd prefer not to.
I guess the question is like, what are you really looking for? You've got this committee and the chair, so the steering committee, do we, like, what are you?
Needs to be steered though.
Yeah, but like, isn't that here right now? So
Right.
we have the discussions amongst the group and there, I just haven't seen a lot of these where usually there'll be like a select board representative or some, a representative on a committee, but, and that could be Rich on the committee, but the committee sits there and we have our task. We work on the task, we present it back. I don't think that he needs to be the chair of that steering committee to, that's.
I just need a point person, basically.
Just-
I certainly,
He'd be the point person, but not.
I'd certainly participate, yes.
Okay. Does anybody object to my performing that role? Okay. Why don't we do that? That takes the heat off of him. We still have the benefit of his experience and so forth. John, you?
I'll serve on the committee.
You'll do it. Anybody else from our group? Okay. And then, after the meeting is officially over, I wanna make sure I don't misspell your names. Maybe we can have those who have volunteered to be on this come up and sign in and email us.
It's right there.
Okay, you got emails on there?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. I wanna talk about when we wanna do this, how many meetings we need, where we're gonna do it, and sort of a little bit about the structure. When do we wanna do this? I throw out May and June. What do you all think?
Can I just ask one preliminary question?
Sure.
I'm still struggling to understand what, say, the scope of work or RFP is going to be. You know, and when I look at the charge, it says, you know, basically three things. Identify businesses that would fit into the community, identify restrictions or impediments to the business relocating to Lyme, recommend measures to enable appropriate businesses to Lyme. And then I heard things, people talking about housing and elderly housing, and I'm really confused about what.
Yeah, I think our
This is about-
charge has, as a practical matter, expanded beyond that to take a broader view, and I
Well,
don't.
does the Board of Selectmen need to redo your
We can
charge?
amend it.
We can.
All right, that would, I think that would be helpful for the RFP and for the broader public, you know, understanding of what you're doing.
All right.
Somewhat related is just this whole issue of River Road for me and how much it will cost, and we're talking about taxes and how much we pay. Is that in any way part of this? Like, it seems that this is very expensive and will continue to be expensive for the future. Is that in consideration in the debate? or is
I mean,
this
it certainly could come up in a charrette, you know, at a community meeting. That is something that could be, but is that a specific charge of our group? No.
No, it's not to manage costs at all as it affects our tax base.
Well, it is among the challenges that we face.
That's what I
in that
thought
sense.
we were going to be
Like, I think
discussing.
if that's one of the second biggest costs of our future, and something, is it not part of what we think about, or not? Like,
Something
my
we
little
think
toll road, is that, I love my toll road.
Four beers, it really was.
No, no, okay.
Okay,
No, but is it, I mean, it's to the question of what is the charge
Yes.
here?
Right.
And is the cost base, which, you know, there's money that comes in versus commercial taxes.
We explored the revenue end of it last year,
Okay.
or 2 years ago.
And this is the cost save side.
This is expanding the tax base.
Okay, so nothing to do with the cost. Is that part, or can we expand it to?
that's kind of a whole
So
different,
I-
that's budget committee
There
and
are-
different.
Yeah, I guess the bigger question is, as the steering committee is put together, there should be a written, something written that helps us figure out exactly what we want to do. It doesn't have to be long, just a paragraph or two
We'll
sentences.
try to have that for you.
Does that make sense, though?
Absolutely.
And I just, if I can weasel in somewhere like additional revenue, not just commercial, but even my little toll road.
Like I said, we did that 2 years ago.
Yeah, but I'm
would-
here today, like, and I can't afford to live here, so I'm
Right.
here in this room today, not 2
I'm in the
years ago.
same boat.
Well, I think.
I know, but can we
to-
talk about it today instead of just addressing what was done 2 years?
I think there's things in the landscape that are changing. I mean, even the conversation that, you know, Rusty has started down in Concord has surfaced some new ideas. So to Jonathan's point, I think we have to keep an open mind.
Just because we did 2 years ago doesn't mean we can't trust new good ideas.
May I ask a question of the select woman? Ma'am, have the select people discussed bonds? Have they discussed bonds?
We have 3 bonds now, we've discussed them, and at this point, we're unwilling to add a 4th bond.
What are the bonds?
The earliest one that's going to be retired is the highway department, highway
retired?
garage. It'll be retired in 2024.
All right.
And then this town office building, I don't know the date on that. And then the school.
And we have sliding interest rates on all of these?
Correct.
Are they fixed?
Yes,
Yes, they are.
they're very good.
3.8.
I imagine they're terrific. And
And,
what holds us back from going for another bond?
Because we your capacity to pay it back.
I see. Well, how can we be near any capacity when every year we're asked to give more?
We
How
got-
can we be near a capacity? How does that's nonsensical.
I'm not sure I followed you. What
Well,
I'm talking.
when the town needs money, they increase our taxes.
Can I make one comment?
Yes.
Which is not a friendly thing to say. But the basic problem is New Hampshire has no income tax and no sales tax.
It's a big problem.
We are dependent upon everything on property. If you look at any state in the country which is dependent on property tax, they're in the same situation we are today. You cannot run a town or a state dependent only on property tax.
Absolutely, 100%.
And therefore,
Here,
if we want to address the problem, we go to Concord and we start talking about convincing people for an income tax and a sales tax.
Yes.
And I am, as I think most people here know, would pay a lot more taxes under income tax, and I'm very happy to do it, because it's the long-term future of this state and this town. But we can go through this whole thing about, we have to have revenue. We have to run roads, we have to have police, we have to have highway. It costs money, and you can't run it on property tax.
How
That
much
is our problem.
How much money do we send to the state?
I'll have to think about that. We get some $90,000 a year for highways from the state. I think that's
It's a
about.
few, Jonathan knows.
Yeah, I believe this is not obviously a precise figure, but we do send a few dollars in state education property tax to the state. It gets redistributed, not in a equal way back to the town of Lyme, but that's about how much we send, at least in property tax.
When you say a few dollars, what's the dollar?
I wanna say it's $2 or $3 and change of your total $27.18 roughly on your.
Okay, so what would that be in the town? How much money would that be?
We're 330 million in assessed value. Somebody wants to do that math?
Now, the reason I asked
It's less than
that,
10%.
Yeah.
the reason I asked that is that maybe it's time for Lyme to say, we're not sending you any more money.
It's not that much.
Resist.
Can we,
It's
can we?
not worth it.
It isn't worth it.
Let's stay focused here a little bit. How many meetings is it the consensus of the folks here tonight do we need to have? I think you have to have at least 2. Do you need more than that as far as visioning meetings? What do you
As
think?
far as the
Oh,
steering
yes.
committee to,
No, as far as the visioning meetings themselves.
I think it depends on what you come back with for the mission.
Right, what you want us to do.
Once we have the
We
mission,
have to
we
do
can
research
say
and
it's
work and
2, 4,
whatnot.
3.
What are we doing?
Premature to ask that question.
Okay.
Once we have the mission, we can sit there and look at this, the time allotment it's gonna take to get a bunch of people around some beers and figure this out.
Feedback from the town.
What about
Yes, sounds like that's,
the place
Okay.
I hope.
for such meetings? You
Beers at
guys,
your house are good air.
How many people would you say you'd like to have?
many as possible.
I mean, I think that, I'm trying to think, Earl, we had 7,500, when we used the basement of the church, remember?
Oh, easy, there's a lot.
I think that's,
how many?
7,500, 150 people.
Well, that would fit in
Or the academy building, or?
The sanctuary upstairs.
Well, no, you want to be downstairs. But a couple hundred people would fit in there, I would think.
I think the venues the town has, the academy building, the congregational church,
You should go to
the
Dallas
school.
or the inn.
Well,
The
it's
school.
bigger.
The
It
school.
costs money if you go to the.
Maybe the school.
Pulling everybody in to do it.
Oh,
The
School has
academy,
community
how's the academy hold up there?
Upstairs?
150.
150.
How many can we fit upstairs in the academy?
You have a limit on from
150.
number of people.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
second floor,
it's not, it's.
50 people, I think. it
No,
is.
no, no.
150.
150,
One
Academy
fifty.
building?
yeah.
So,
I renovated
can I
it.
just- So we're talking about steering committee meetings, we said what, 11 people?
This is the next step.
No more than
This is a step beyond that, so you go through the steering committee, you do develop the visioning
Right.
process, then it's
Make a
bring in the community,
presentation.
or bring the community to whiteboard, come up with all the ideas.
The process
So
of
that's-
doing.
But
That's
that's
a
way
separate
far
meeting.
out
Yes,
there.
it's the
isn't
next,
it?
it's
Yeah.
like phase 3.
Right, so then we would figure out how many people would
The
expect.
school's gonna be the best location.
I think.
Could do tens
I
on
think
the
the
green.
school's gonna be the best.
It doesn't have any, it's.
It's neutral.
So,
We can
Nils,
use
you're
the
trying to work
interior
backwards from
full-
a May to June completion for the vision process?
I would hope by midsummer that we have gone
Midsummer.
through this.
Okay,
Um,
and so the
I
steering,
don't wanna wait 2 years to do this because it's just,
but you're willing to if that's what it takes?
well, yeah,
Then the
we've
data's old.
We
been
need to
through
get
this
good
once, and to
information.
get it all done took 5 or 6 years in terms of to get things built and get sewers extended. But
Nope.
So, yeah, so when you get the public in, is it like everybody in a room doing the charrette, or is it smaller groups, or is it like? written
That's for the steering
surveys, or-
committee to decide.
that's right. In my experience before, the head of the professor from Ball State acted as the master of ceremonies. He had his act together, he'd done it many, many times with groups. And actually, in that case, we had passed out, this is some years ago, cameras, film cameras, given them away for free that people could come in, go around town, take pictures of what they liked, what they didn't like, and we put those on the walls. And then he presented some information about what the, you know, sort of the data, the statistics that described our community, talked about similar communities.
See,
And
Now, you're dating yourself.
Yeah.
Today, everybody has a cell phone.
I
All they
am.
have to do is go out and take a picture of this and put it up there, and take a picture of that and put it up
But,
there,
I
and you've
mean,
got it all done.
that's a good, good
And-
idea.
And in fact, I think the steps that you're talking about sound like really good ones. I think that's the purview of the steering committee to come up with what sorts of things do we wanna do. Maybe
Exactly.
we do wanna get an RFP from a couple of different, from interested people to say, oh, here's what I would do. I would do whatever, I'd pass out free film cameras or something, you know,
But
and find out what the process is. Yeah.
So this goes back to my question, I'm sorry to, you know, just trying to figure out how you're gonna do that for $15,000, and also do the kind of research that you need to kind of nail down the facts and nail down, okay, this is what everybody likes, but here are the facts that we have to make our decision in. And how are we gonna be doing both of those at the same time?
Why not?
Like, I don't know, just asking, I'm trying to figure out, and how you do that for $15,000.
That's why we have a steering
Oh, I
committee.
see.
Yeah.
Number one, you may have to raise more money. That's the easy part. Number two, one of the critical things on the 11 people who are involved in the steering committee is to create the energy and excitement which is gonna bring the people in. I mean, that is the most important thing. This is get people really excited over doing this. I mean, right now, there are a lot of grumpy people dealing with this. And so I think that we've got a challenge.
Well,
Who do you use for a lawyer?
for a
Lawyer.
Town's attorney.
You have a town's attorney?
Yes.
That we can
town
use?
hasn't. I have certain insights in that regard.
Yeah.
But
What do we need an attorney?
In terms of the internet that runs through this town.
There's another group
There's
working
an
on that, and
internet
that's,
committee.
it's not our
Duncan?
charge.
Duncan, I'm on that committee too. I'd be happy to talk to you after.
So mission, vision, come up with a plan, RFP, expand the community, get people in talk,
Exactly.
go from there.
And
Right.
just one, like, to the question of the research we need, one question, and maybe it's been answered, I'm sorry, I haven't paid enough attention, but the future of River Road, and is it gonna be something in 5 years, if we spend $500,000 on it this year, is it just good money after bad, where in fact in 2 years, because of global warming or whatever you wanna say, it's gonna be washed into the river and we're just throwing away $500,000? Is there a study that tells us what will be done in the future? Like,
Oh, boy.
so I know this is, but this, we're talking about tax
Right,
basis
we
and
are.
my future and
And-
my paying for my kid going to college and.
Part of what we're doing is working diligently to try and get Great River Hydro, the owner of the dam, to set aside a mitigation fund as part of the relicensing process to pay for all of
Right,
this.
why would they do that?
Because they're,
They're
Because
legally
they
obligated.
wanna get relicensed.
Hey, I appreciate what you've done on that.
We
I think
control the
that's
license?
We,
For the people.
FERC, the
It's a
Federal
FERC
Energy
federal.
Relicensing Commission,
Okay,
does that.
And we're not
we
the only
have
town
been working
involved.
with them,
okay.
with.
So our energy focused on holding them up and making sure they put aside money to take care of River Road is
Right.
our main goal here.
No,
No.
that's one of our
I mean,
goals.
not our goal, but like the goal of what you're talking
It's
about.
a fundraising goal, really, I mean, it's a.
But I don't wanna be naive and think that they're just gonna hand money because they're
Oh,
a
no.
for-profit, private equity owned
We've
firm.
gotten the attention, we're even going so far as to try and get the
Ru-
federal commissioners come to town and
Ru-
take a boat
Russ-
ride and see.
Here's
they
my,
new
here's my
owners now?
view, like, they are
Yes, and
not
yes.
gonna listen to us. That's my
Oh,
view.
we
I
have
don't
their
think-
attention.
I-
We do have their attention, believe me.
Let's talk in a year, I doubt it, I doubt they'll
Yeah,
give us
we have a chance.
I think,
But to address
Since
your
you
question,
are
look at that
away,
map there,
okay,
that's what we're looking at.
yeah, I just don't want us to be naive
Downtown
and
where they
think.
can
there's
find,
no naivety, that's a
Like,
huge
it's
if
like
there's anything I can work
a
with
whole
you,
revenue study
make that.
versus
They have better
just
lawyers
how to
than we
relocate
do.
businesses to
And
Lyme.
then in a couple of months, after I get some other affairs straightened up, I can take on more responsibility, but I would like to lay low for
Here
at least
is,
3 or 4 weeks.
My comment, they have better lawyers, more money than we do, I guess is my comment.
you know, Rusty has done a lot of work on this, and he's come to me a number of times as an attorney, just to, hey, can I run this spot by you?
Sure.
And the basic concept is, the Federal Power Act said that in it, and he related this in the meeting yesterday, that you have to, what's the term, reservations? I'm positive that as a condition of the grant of the original license, which involved raising the level of the dam about 15 feet and flooding this whole valley, that they had to maintain the reservations, which was this 200-year-old path along, you know, that was an
Yeah.
Indian way,
Yeah.
that is now River Road. So they, by pulsing the river up and down that's eating at the bank,
Yep.
I don't think there's any lack of science to
Nope.
show that to be the case. But right now, FERC, for whatever reason, doesn't have a copy of the original order, which is outrageous. And so right now, the job of your lawyer is to do whatever he's gotta do, I would think, to get our hands on the copy that they must have. If they don't have a copy of what they're operating under, something's wrong. And that's the rub at this
Yeah.
point.
When will we know if they have a copy or not? Is it next week?
Well, if I were representing, I would go about it a certain way to force the issue and get in front of a judge, but I'm not.
I would be shocked that a large private equity firm would buy a hydro dam like that without having the original permit in their closing materials. I'll just put that out there.
So it's gotta be,
I
it
mean,
has to be
I'm sure
discovered.
that
Well, it has been relicensed once since the
Right.
first
I'm paying
licensing.
taxes, or there's money going to this that's taking away from my college kids' fund, so, like, I just don't know what's gonna.
I don't know whether any of you have any political clout or with any of our people, there were several at the meeting yesterday, but the state people need to become involved in this that represent us here locally to put some heat on
In the meanwhile, we'll just keep paying for River Road and fixing it
We don't
up.
have an
Right,
alternative.
You got it.
Commissioner Hume and Maggie Hassan and.
My wife grew up with Hassan, but I don't think that's gonna help us.
Okay, anybody have any other matter that they would like to bring to our attention? We'll try to.
Can we assume that somebody from your committee is going to contact the people on that list to try to
Yes.
establish a meeting place and time?
We'll meet here.
Let's do it right now.
Oh, okay.
You said 2 weeks, it's the 28th of March.
Well,
That's-
yeah,
it's a-
the next meeting here is in 2 weeks, same time, same place.
No, I gotta confess, one of my constraints is I still practice law in Ohio. So I'm here about 60% of the time, but I gotta go back to the mothership occasionally, so I've been brought in by conference call in the past. Earl just quietly said that he could act, since everybody knows where he lives, he could act as a contact person as well, but can I give you my cell phone? You can call me anytime.
Okay,
I'll send it out in an email, so you can bounce back to that.
so what we need to know is who's gonna develop the RFP?
I'll work on it. Does somebody else want to become involved? Tell me your name again.
Yes, Phil Barta,
How's the last name spelled?
B-A-R-T-A.
So we'll meet right now and, okay. Anybody else have anything else?
And then that'll be presented at the next meeting and we'll put it out.
Okay. Thank you very much for coming. Lots of great ideas. This is a work in progress. We just didn't have the ability to bring you a program because, you know, we have to kind of invent ourselves here as we go forward. I think this was very good evening's discussion. Thank you. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Great. Favor? Thank you.
They're actually just gonna.
Oh, just having it.